We've got Rabbi Dr Jonathan Romain, who's a Religious Alliance for Dignity in Dying, first up, and then we're going to talk as well to Stephen Green, National Director of Christian Voice. Dr Jonathan, a very good morning to you. Welcome.
Good morning.
Thanks very much for joining us. I think I know your view on this, but for those of us who haven't, or those of our viewers and listeners who haven't heard about it, you're against this bill, I think, are you not? Or you...
No, absolutely the opposite.
Sorry.
I'm very much in favour. And not for any ideological reasons, not for religious reasons, just practical reasons.
Yeah.
As a minister of religion who spent the last 40 years going around hospices and hospitals and seeing people die. And of course, there's lots of people who have wonderful deaths, and that's great. But there's also a lot of people who have awful deaths from motor neuron, Parkinson, where their last few weeks are really agonizing and who want to let go. And I'm sure you and many of your viewers right now have heard people in hospital saying, "Doctor, can't you help me? Can't you ease me on my way? Can't you give me something?" Because they're really, they're in their last few weeks, they're in pain. Yeah. And in whose interest are we forcing them to stay alive? So in other words, if they are terminally ill, they have to be terminally ill, so they're dying already, and they want to let go because they're in pain or whatever, then this bill is about saying, yes, you've got that option.
Yes.
We all want to have a
but is the issue not, though, Dr Jonathan, whether or not a judgment is made as to not necessarily whether somebody is terminally ill, but whether there's a loophole somewhere in this bill which will mean that people will possibly be able to exploit it. I mean, I tend to believe your side of the argument, which is that, you know, we're all relatively sensible individuals, we're all reasonably competent at knowing when somebody wants something that they should be able to be granted it, you know, freedom of choice and all of that. But are you absolutely sure that there isn't a loophole somewhere in this bill which would enable anyone who might be, shall we say, with malice aforethought, thinking of doing something else?
I'm pretty confident that there aren't any loopholes, partly because doctors are already trained and they will have extra training to spot coercion, partly because there's a 14-year penalty if you are found to be influencing or guilty of coercion, and also because, frankly, this isn't a leap in the dark. You know, this is very closely modelled on what's happened in Oregon.
Yeah.
27 years, and Australia for the last 7 or 8 years. In other words, this is a tried and tested method. It's been working, it's regulated, it's monitored. There are different systems elsewhere in the world. We're not doing that, we're doing the Oregon model, and also we're making it the British model. And that's what's important about today. MPs saying, this is our template, how can we make it as good as possible? So yes, it avoids any loopholes, but it also allows those people who want to let go. Now, frankly, most of us will carry on to our last breath.
Yeah.
Those people in agony, we've got to give them that option, that right, that choice. It's their death, their body. Why can't they have that right to let go if they so wish and if they are dying anyway? And to me, that's common sense. You know, it's about giving people choices and autonomy.
Right.
And of course, we've got to make the law as robust as possible. And that's what today's about. You know, looking at all the fine details. So, for instance, there's been a lot of fuss about the bill will no longer be supervised by a High Court judge. Well, actually, that's an improvement, because instead there's going to be a panel of 3 people, not just 1, 3 people, and not just a lawyer, but also a psychiatrist and a social worker who can look at the person from all sorts of different angles. So they're really making it as strong and as robust as possible. And I've got, you know, frankly, as I say, it's not ideological. I'm not coming at it from a set view. I'm talking about real people and real life. And I think it's...
And what about how many people this will actually affect, do you think? I mean, has anybody done any studies on that? I mean, how many people, for example, would you come across in your day-to-day, you know, business of what you do, who would say, you know, if only the law was changed, you know, how many people actually want to have an assisted dying episode, if you like, in the course of, say, 12 months?
I can give you a very exact answer because the government did an impact assessment and they reckon there's not going to be an avalanche. It'll affect 0.7% of all deaths in any year. So less than 1%. And actually,
how many people is that, though?
I don't know the exact number, to be very honest, but I know that, funnily enough, that also corresponds to exactly what's happened in Oregon for the last 27 years.
Yeah.
I think 0.8%. Again, we're not going into the dark. We know exactly what's going to be happening. And frankly, there will be a cry of despair and sorrow and disappointment across the country if this law doesn't get passed. Because there's a lot of people who want to have that option and who say, if I am I want to carry on to the last moment, but if things get really pear-shaped, I just want to know that I can let go gently if I
Yeah.
if it
I listened to a doctor, I think you were on as well with Ian Collins yesterday afternoon on this very station, who said that he would not feel comfortable actually administering whatever it is that the assisted dying method, shall we say, would be, because that's an issue for an awful lot of doctors who might have maybe the Hippocratic Oath to worry about, or, first do no harm. I mean, in terms of the assisted dying sort of physical act, if you like, I mean, who's going to do it?
Well, okay, good point. Number one, the doctors don't do it. It has to be self-administered. So yes, the doctor will give a prescription, but it's the person themselves who has to take it, because we want to be really, really sure that they want to do it of their own free will. But secondly, yeah, of course, doctors may have objections, and therefore they can opt out, and that's part of the bill. In the same way that
yeah, but is it a pill though, or is it an injection? What is it?
oh, it's a medical potion, a medical potion.
So you have to drink it.
You drink it. That's right. So you've got to be able to lift up the cup, take it to your lips,
Right.
and do so. And that's really important, so that it's not anybody else killing you. It's you taking that life-ending medication yourself. And doctors who don't want to do it, they don't have to do it. The same with Abortion Act. It's exactly the same thing. If a doctor's got moral objections, religious objections, they don't have to do it. Now, we know some doctors won't do it, but we also know there's something like 30,000 doctors who will. So that won't be an issue.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Because, I mean, I only speak from my own experience, as everybody does. My mother ended up living till she was 99. In her final months, she probably would have been quite happy to take a potion, but when she was younger, when she was about 92, 93, she used to say to me, if I get to the point where, I'm bedridden, you just give me some cyanide and I'll take it. And of course, as we got old, we used to joke about it, and I used to say to her, are you ready for the cyanide yet? And she's like, no, absolutely not. And, no matter how badly she felt and how ill she was, and she was very compos mentis, mentally, she was like, well, I used to say that, but I don't really want it now. And, so it's there are some grey areas here, surely.
Well, you're right but there's nothing stronger in us, in you, in me, than the life force. And we all want to live for as long as possible, but there are some people who, if the pain is unbearable, then...
No, I get that.
And I've seen this, this isn't theory. I've been around the wards, I've seen hospices where people have been looked after wonderfully. And the other thing, by the way, Mike, is that the Parliament itself had a Health and Social Care Select Committee, which reported on this for 18 months. And they found that, number one, that there is no slippery slope. In other words, the law, once it's passed, will stay exactly as is. And secondly, they found that palliative care, which is so great and needs every support, cannot help everybody. And it was palliative care specialists who said, we do a great job, but there are some people we cannot help. So it's for those sort of people who we want to give that option. That's all it's about, options, choices. I think everybody deserves that choice.
Okay. Very interesting subject. We'll talk about it, I'm sure, again. Rabbi Dr. Jonathan Romain from the Religious Alliance for Dignity in Dying. Thank you very much indeed.